My Week with Marilyn is directed by Simon Curtis, and it stars Michelle Williams, Eddie Redmayne, Kenneth Branagh, and Dominic Cooper. This film is based off of the diaries of Colin Clark, who was part of a family of very rich individuals, and he was sort of the disappointment of the family, and all he wanted to do was go into Hollywood and work in movies. He spent his Thursday evenings at the cinema, where he loved watching Orson Welles and Hitchcock films. He especially loved to watch Marilyn Monroe on the screen, who he fell in love with. He got a job working at a production company and ended up being the third assistant director on a film that Marilyn was working on, and throughout the course of the film he became very close to her. This film is many different things. It is kind of first and foremost a story of kind of what it's like to be in the world of Hollywood and what it's like to make a movie. Anyone who wants to become a director should watch this film, because the director in the movie, who is also a star of the movie, is kind of an asshole, and he doesn't treat Marilyn very well, and he's a very impatient man. So anyone who wants to know how to not direct actors, watch this movie. It also explores what it's like to be very famous like Marilyn Monroe was, and how it takes a toll on person emotionally and psychologically. In this movie she is taking a lot of pills, she is married, presumably happy, to a writer who she doesn't think loves her very much. She's a very distraught woman who doesn't have very much confidence in herself, and she seems to be having a problem with her role in this movie. She doesn't seem to believe her character, really exists. She depends on her coach to help her with this role, who is constantly nagging the director to let her have her own space. This film just basically explores what it's like to be in Hollywood and to be under pressure and to work on a film with a very famous person, and what that brings to the table, because obviously I would assume that when dealing with first-time actors, an experienced director may have an easier time or maybe a harder time with them, but when you're very famous and people are expecting great things from you and you're having a very hard time getting emotionally involved in the film, you may have a harder time than you think, and that can be very stressful for the director and the actress, and this really explores how it takes a toll on everybody, really. Given how I know very little about Marilyn Monroe, it's hard for me to tell whether or not Michelle Williams really embodied the character, but for what she did very well, as did the other actors. We get special appearances by Judi Dench, who has a small part in the film and doesn't really spend much time on screen. And then we have Emma Watson, who plays what I assume was the costume designer, who gets involved with Colin, and they have a little relationship that doesn't really go very far. They start out dating, they date like once, and then they kind of drift away because Colin becomes more involved with Marilyn and she becomes a little bit jealous. My Week with Marilyn is a good film. It's not one that I think everyone would enjoy, however I think that a majority of the population would like this film if you are into this kind of material. I am giving My Week with Marilyn 3 out of 5 stars. It's worth a matinee viewing, however, as always, if you can wait, then a rental is always good.